You have done it again. You are standing directly in front of an individual you have encountered at least 3 or 4 times, and their name has simply vanished. It is not even hovering at the tip of your tongue. It is completely, cleanly absent, as if it were never filed in your memory in the first place. The worst part is not even the act of forgetting. It is the subsequent 12 seconds of pure improvised theater you are forced to perform. You subtly angle your body, desperately hoping someone else in the room will say their name first, or perhaps that their phone will ring, or even that the building might catch fire. We have all experienced this, but the people who do this most frequently, those who chronically and consistently forget names, are not being careless or rude. Furthermore, they are almost certainly not as unintelligent as they have been silently led to believe. There is actually something very specific occurring within their brains, and once you understand the mechanics of it, you will never feel guilty about it in the same way again. Let us begin with the moment you meet someone new. Let's performing an enormous amount of work simultaneously. It is reading their face, registering their tone of voice, and figuring out the social Your working memory, which is the short-term holding space located in your prefrontal cortex, is essentially juggling 6 different things at once into that exact moment of cognitive chaos. Someone hands you a single, arbitrary sound. Their name, "Hi, I'm Kevin." Now, the name Kevin does not inherently mean anything. It does not connect to anything you already know. It does not trigger a specific concept, an image, a feeling, or a pre-existing association. It just sits there, isolated in a brain that is, frankly, far too busy to baby-sit it. Psychologists actually have a specific term for why this happens. In 1987, researchers McQueenie and Ellis published a fascinating study demonstrating what is now referred to as the Baker paradox. They told one group of participants that a person in a photo was a baker by profession, while they told a separate group that the same person's surname was Baker. Days later, the people who learned the occupation remembered it far more easily than the people who learned it as a name. It was the exact same word, yet it had completely different retention levels. This is because the word baker as a job activates a whole web of associations: flour, bread, early mornings, and warmth. As a name, however, it activates nothing. It simply floats there, rootless. Names, by their very nature, are semantically empty, and your brain, being the efficient machine that it is, preferentially holds on to things that carry meaning. Think about the last funeral you attended. You probably remember the smell of the flowers, the specific silence in the room, who ended up crying the most, and perhaps a sentence someone said that resonated deep in your chest. You likely do not remember what was written on the order of service, because your brain made a decision without consulting you about what actually mattered, and it was not the printed text. It was never the printed text. Names are the order of service. Everything else about a person is the funeral. Now, this is where it might get a little uncomfortable, because it is more personal than most people want to admit. A significant portion of chronic name forgetters are people who are extremely in their own heads during social interactions, though usually in an anxious way rather than an arrogant one. While the other person is introducing themselves, these individuals are internally narrating. Am I making enough eye contact? Is this handshake too firm? Did I just interrupt them? The name enters briefly, and then the internal monologue bulldozes straight over it. This is actually a documented phenomenon called the next in line effect. First recorded in 1973 by psychologist Malcolm Brenner. He found that people waiting to speak in a group, anticipating their own turn, showed dramatically reduced memory for what the person directly before them said. This is because, in their heads, they had already moved on and were already preparing the next thing to say. They are editing themselves in real time. People who live with social anxiety or even just a hyperactive self-awareness are essentially stuck in that mode permanently. They are never quite fully present. They are always half a step into what comes next, which means the moment a name is actually offered to them, they are already somewhere else. If that describes you, here is the reframe. You do not have a memory problem. You have a preoccupation problem. Those are two very different things. There is also something worth saying about the people on the other end of this. The people whose names get forgotten. The emotional sting of it is genuinely real, and it would be unjust to pretend otherwise. Having your name forgotten, especially repeatedly, lands like a small but pointed message. You didn't matter enough to stick. That is how it feels. Even if that conclusion is completely wrong, that is what the brain hears, and the brain does not always take the rational approach. However, the person who forgot your name probably thought about the conversation you had afterward. They remember what you said about your sister, or the specific way you laughed at something. Maybe you had an odd take that stuck with them. They were there. They were just not quite there for the name part. This is the thing about memory that most people fundamentally misunderstand. It is not a recording. Your brain does not store experiences the way a hard drive stores files. It stores impressions, emotions, patterns, and fragments, and it prioritizes ruthlessly. High emotion is stored. Surprising information is stored. Anything connected to something you already know is stored. But one arbitrary syllable handed to you at the exact moment you were busy trying to seem normal in front of a stranger. Good luck. People who forget names easily often have something else in common. They tend to be highly associative thinkers. Their memory is richly contextual. They remember stories and feelings, and the look on someone's face when they said something that mattered. If you ask them what someone was wearing at a party 3 years ago, they might actually tell you, but if you ask them the name of the person standing next to them, they go blank, because their brain was cataloging everything except the label. This is not a flaw in the mind. It is just a particular architecture. It is one that is, frankly, better suited to storytelling, to emotional attunement, and to the kind of listening that makes people feel genuinely understood. It is simply worse suited to the specific, mechanical task of holding and remembering what someone was called under social pressure. None of this means you should not try to get better at it. By the way, repeating someone's name back immediately when you meet them, or connecting it to a visual or a person you already know, works. These techniques work because you are manually doing what your brain refuses to do automatically, building the association that was not there. You are essentially constructing a little bridge between Kevin and something that already has a place in your mental landscape. But the shame spiral, the quiet, low-grade belief that forgetting names makes you an uncaring person, someone who moves through the world without really registering other people, that part is wrong. It is worth saying clearly, because a lot of people carry that guilt without ever examining where it came from, or whether it is actually true. You are not absent or dismissive. You are someone whose brain prioritizes differently, gets hijacked by its own internal weather, and sometimes fails at the single least interesting thing about a person, the arbitrary sound their parents assigned them, before they had done a single thing worth remembering. The name was always the least of it. What you remember about people, the real stuff, the texture of who they are, that part is still there. It has been there the whole time. If this exploration of the human mind has changed how you view those awkward social lapses, please subscribe and like the channel. We are uncovering the hidden mechanics of behavior that define our daily lives. Let's cultivate a deeper understanding together. The next insight into our complex nature will be revealed soon.